When Conan the Barbarian arrived in 1982, it did not feel like a typical fantasy film. It felt ancient, heavy, almost ritualistic. That tone was deliberate. Director John Milius wanted the movie to feel less like entertainment and more like a forgotten myth being rediscovered. To achieve this, he stripped the narrative to its barest elements, reducing dialogue to a minimum and allowing images, music, and physical presence to carry the story. In an era increasingly driven by fast-paced exposition, this silence was a provocation, demanding patience and attention from the audience. The opening sequence alone reveals how radical this approach was. Conan's childhood is not explained through words but through repetition, violence, and time. The image of the wheel of pain turning endlessly was not invented for spectacle. Milius saw it as a metaphor for civilization itself, grinding individuals into strength or ruin. Arnold Schwarzenegger reportedly spent weeks performing variations of that motion, not just for physical conditioning, but to internalize the idea that Conan's power was earned through suffering rather than destiny. Today, that emphasis on endurance over talent feels strikingly out of step with modern heroic narratives. Arnold Schwarzenegger's casting was initially controversial, not because of his physique, but because of his accent. Studio executives feared audiences would not accept a hero who spoke with such a heavy European inflection. Milius, however, saw this as an advantage. He believed Conan should sound foreign, even alien, reinforcing the idea that he belonged to no nation or culture. As a result, Arnold's limited dialogue became a strength. Conan does not persuade or explain, he acts. That restraint helped redefine what cinematic masculinity could look like on screen. One of the most overlooked aspects of Conan the Barbarian is how seriously it treats violence. Bloodshed is never playful or stylized. Each act of brutality carries weight, often followed by stillness or reflection. This tone was intentional. Milius viewed violence as a moral force, something that shaped societies and individuals, not something to be consumed lightly. In today's landscape of spectacle-driven action films, this solemn treatment feels almost philosophical. The character of Thulsa Doom, played by James Earl Jones, was radically transformed from the original source material. In Robert Howard's stories, Doom is a far more conventional villain. Milius reimagined him as a cult leader, soft-spoken and charismatic. This choice made Doom more unsettling than a traditional tyrant. He does not dominate through fear alone, but through belief. His calm voice and controlled movements contrast sharply with Conan's raw physicality, turning their conflict into a clash between ideology and instinct. James Earl Jones's performance was carefully restrained. He was instructed to avoid theatrical villainy and instead speak as though every word was a truth already accepted. This subtlety made Doom feel disturbingly real. Even now, his portrayal resonates in a world increasingly aware of how power can be exercised quietly, through persuasion rather than force. The film's iconic score by Basil Poledouris was composed before much of the movie was edited. This was highly unusual. Milius wanted the music to shape the rhythm of the film, not merely accompany it. Poledouris drew heavily from classical structures, using recurring themes like operatic motifs rather than background cues. The result was a score that feels monumental, elevating scenes of silence into moments of grandeur. Today, it remains one of the most influential fantasy scores ever composed, precisely because it treats the material with operatic seriousness. Another little-known detail is how much of the film was shot in Spain, using landscapes chosen for their timeless quality. Milius avoided recognizable landmarks, ensuring that the world of Conan could not be easily placed in history. This decision reinforced the film's mythic tone, making it feel suspended outside of time. Even now, those locations retain a primal emptiness rarely captured in contemporary cinema. Conan's sword itself carries symbolic weight. It is not merely a weapon but a burden. The film repeatedly emphasizes the act of forging, breaking, and reclaiming blades. Steel, in Milius's vision, represents civilization's double edge, creation and destruction intertwined. This idea is spoken aloud only once, but it governs the entire narrative. Strength alone is meaningless without purpose, a theme that quietly challenges the very power fantasies the film appears to celebrate. Perhaps most surprising is how little Conan the Barbarian cares about victory. The story is not structured around triumph, but survival. Revenge does not bring satisfaction, only closure. This emotional restraint gives the film a somber dignity. Conan does not smile at the end. He endures. That endurance, more than his strength, is what defines him. Even 4 decades later, Conan the Barbarian stands apart because it refuses to reassure its audience. It does not promise justice, progress, or redemption. It offers only the certainty of struggle and the dignity of facing it without illusion. That uncompromising worldview, forged in silence, steel, and music, is what continues to give the film its lasting, almost intimidating power. As the film moves deeper into its world, Conan the Barbarian reveals another unexpected quality: its relationship with fate. Unlike most heroic narratives, Conan's journey is not guided by prophecy or destiny. There is no chosen one, no divine mandate. The gods exist, but they are distant, indifferent, and often mocked. Conan himself questions their value openly, treating them less as moral guides and more as forces to be tested. This skepticism toward divine purpose gives the film a bleak honesty that still feels rare within the fantasy genre. The famous prayer Conan offers before battle is often misunderstood as devotion. In reality, it is almost transactional. He asks Crom for strength, not mercy, and makes it clear that if no help comes, he will still fight. This moment encapsulates the film's philosophy: belief is optional, effort is not. In an era when fantasy often leaned heavily on spiritual destiny, this scene quietly rejected the comfort of faith in favor of personal responsibility. Another overlooked detail lies in the film's approach to friendship. The bond between Conan, Valeria, and Subutai is never formalized through speeches or declarations. Their loyalty is expressed through shared danger and mutual respect, not emotional exposition. Valeria's strength, in particular, was unusual for the time. She is not a companion defined by romance, but by competence. Her presence challenges Conan physically and intellectually, presenting partnership rather than dependency. This portrayal stands out even today for its restraint and dignity. The character of Subutai introduces a subtle tonal contrast. His humor is not modern wit but pragmatic irony, shaped by survival rather than optimism. His perspective reminds the audience that Conan's worldview is not universal, even within this harsh world. Subutai survives through adaptability rather than confrontation, offering an alternative form of strength that the film never diminishes or mocks. This balance prevents Conan's brute force from becoming a singular ideal. The film's treatment of sexuality is another area often overlooked. Desire is present, but it is never framed as conquest. Intimacy appears as a temporary refuge from brutality, not as a reward for heroism. Valeria and Conan's relationship exists within the same harsh logic as the rest of the film: intense, fleeting, and vulnerable. This refusal to romanticize love as salvation reinforces the story's sober tone. One of the most technically demanding aspects of the production was its commitment to practical effects. There is a physical weight to every costume, every weapon, every structure. The armor is heavy because it had to be worn. The swords feel dangerous because they were. This physical authenticity grounds the film, preventing it from drifting into abstraction. In today's era of digital spectacle, the tangible reality of Conan's world gives it a visceral credibility that continues to resonate. The film's pacing also defies conventional wisdom. Long stretches pass without dialogue, allowing the audience to absorb landscape and movement. These pauses are not empty, they are contemplative. They invite the viewer to reflect rather than react. This rhythm mirrors ancient oral storytelling, where silence carried as much meaning as speech. The result is a cinematic experience that feels closer to ritual than narrative. Another striking choice is the film's refusal to explain its world in detail. There is no map, no historical exposition, no defined political structure. The Hyborian Age exists as an impression rather than a system. This ambiguity allows the story to function as myth rather than history. By withholding specifics, the film invites interpretation rather than consumption, a choice that gives it lasting flexibility across generations. The influence of Friedrich Nietzsche on John Milius is often mentioned, but rarely examined closely. Conan the Barbarian does not simply celebrate strength, it interrogates it. Strength without direction leads to enslavement, as seen in Conan's early life. Strength with purpose leads to survival, but not happiness. The film presents power as a tool, not a virtue. This distinction elevates the narrative beyond simple power fantasy. Even the film's quieter moments carry symbolic weight. The act of tending wounds, sharpening blades, or sharing food is given as much attention as combat. These scenes remind the audience that survival is built from repetition and care, not just triumph. Heroism is shown as maintenance, not glory. By the midpoint of Conan the Barbarian, it becomes clear that the film is not asking who Conan will become, but what he will refuse to become. He rejects cult obedience, divine submission, and ideological certainty. What remains is a man defined by choice rather than belief. That clarity, forged through hardship and silence, is what gives the film its enduring gravity, preparing the ground for a conclusion that will be earned not through spectacle, but through resolve. As Conan the Barbarian approaches its final act, the film quietly reveals its most unsettling idea, that freedom is not a reward, but a burden. By this point, Conan has gained strength, allies, and experience, yet he is no closer to peace. The narrative refuses to suggest that suffering leads to enlightenment. Instead, it presents endurance as a state of existence rather than a path to transformation. This refusal to offer moral compensation is one of the film's most radical choices. The assault on Thulsa Doom's cult is often remembered for its imagery, but its deeper meaning lies in what it denies. Conan does not liberate followers or expose lies through speeches. The cult collapses not because its ideology is disproven, but because its leader is removed. This stark portrayal suggests that belief systems can survive truth, but not the absence of authority. It is a bleak observation about power structures, one that resonates strongly in any era shaped by charismatic figures. Thulsa Doom's final moments are deliberately stripped of grandeur. There is no plea, no revelation, no dramatic resistance. Doom accepts death with calm resignation, as though his power was never truly his own. This composure reframes him not as a defeated villain, but as a man whose influence depended entirely on being believed. Once that belief evaporates, nothing remains. The film's refusal to dramatize this moment reinforces its central idea. Domination is fragile when it relies on perception rather than force. Conan's reaction to Doom's death is equally restrained. There is no visible satisfaction, no sense of triumph. Revenge, once achieved, reveals itself as hollow. The film does not condemn vengeance, but it does not celebrate it either. It treats revenge as a task to be completed, not a source of meaning. This emotional austerity gives the ending a gravity rarely afforded to fantasy heroes, who are often rewarded with clarity or purpose after victory. The aftermath of Valeria's death further underscores the film's uncompromising worldview. Her brief return, framed as a spiritual intervention, is not portrayed as salvation or reunion. It is temporary, conditional, and costly. Even divine assistance, when it appears, is limited and fleeting. This reinforces the film's skepticism toward transcendence. No power, human or supernatural, offers lasting protection. Survival remains a solitary responsibility. Another often overlooked detail is how the film treats memory. Conan does not speak of his past, nor does he seek to rebuild what was lost. The destruction of his village, the death of his parents, and years of enslavement are not resolved emotionally. They exist as scars, not lessons. The film suggests that trauma does not instruct, it endures. This refusal to psychologize Conan gives the character an almost elemental quality, defined by presence rather than introspection. The closing image of Conan seated on a throne is frequently misread as a promise of fulfillment. In reality, it functions as an irony. The narrator speaks of battles yet to come, not peace achieved. Kingship is presented not as an end, but as another form of struggle. Power changes its shape, but not its weight. This ending resists closure, reinforcing the idea that life does not resolve into meaning, only into continuation. John Milius's ideological imprint is most visible here. The film does not argue for morality, governance, or enlightenment. It argues for clarity. Know what you stand for, know what you oppose, and accept the cost of both. This philosophy, stripped of comfort or optimism, gives Conan the Barbarian its austere dignity. It does not inspire hope so much as respect for resilience. The film's legacy lies in how unapologetically it embraces this worldview. It does not soften with age, nor does it adapt easily to modern sensibilities. That resistance is precisely why it endures. Conan the Barbarian is not a fantasy of escape, but a confrontation with permanence, violence, loss, and effort as constants of existence. Decades later, its power remains undiluted because it does not seek approval. It offers no reassurance, no moral triumph, no promise of progress. It offers only the certainty that strength must be earned, beliefs must be questioned, and survival demands presence. In the end, Conan does not conquer the world. He withstands it, and in that endurance, forged through silence, steel, and resolve, the film finds its lasting, almost intimidating truth.